Okay, well, thanks again for holding, everyone, and welcome once again. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you may be. Welcome to today's Cloud Services Community webcast. Our topic for today is Overcoming Objections to the Cloud. All phone lines are currently in a listen-only mode, and later there will be a question and answer session with instructions being given at that time. You may also ask a question at any time using the chat window located in the control panel. Chat questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Today's session is being recorded, and you'll be provided a copy of today's materials, including the presentation and a link to the recording following the call. Now I'd like to introduce our expert speaker for today's webinar. Brian Dietz is president of Brittenford Systems and is responsible for managing the firm's sales, finances, operations, and technology infrastructure. Before joining Brittenford Systems, Brian was the CFO and treasurer of Picture Vision, Inc., a wholly owned subsidiary of the Eastman Kodak Company, the CFO of the Hamilton Securities Group, and a senior audit manager with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Brian has an MBA from Virginia Commonwealth University and a BS in accounting from Virginia Tech. Brian, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. And I want to talk a little bit about overcoming some objections to cloud computing. Before we get into it, I just want to give you a little bit of background of the agenda we're going to cover today. I wanted to talk a little bit about who we are at Brittenford Systems and how we deal with cloud systems, and how I can share some of the experiences we had. I want to talk a little bit about why organizations are moving to the cloud. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about the economics of cloud solutions, and finally how to build a business case for cloud solutions. So with that, we'll just jump in and just spend a second about Brittenford Systems. We are a value-added reseller. We focus on accounting systems primarily, and we work with several different solutions. We work with Intact, Microsoft Dynamics SL, and Microsoft Dynamics GP. But we also work with other solutions as they touch these accounting systems, and they could be from collaboration and workflow solutions. So you've got some of the Microsoft products, which some of them are on-premise and some are in the cloud. Integrations between solutions and using some Microsoft technology and cloud-based technologies. We also work with some business intelligence solutions, and we've got both on-premise and cloud solutions. Host Analytics is a cloud solution, and BI360 is on-premise. And as we've worked with these accounting systems and integrating with other solutions, we've actually done some application development where we've built solutions connecting solutions. So we've built a product that connects Concur, which is a cloud expense management system with both Intact and Dynamics GP, and some other tools for Intact. And then we also have a CIO or CTO advisory practice, strategic infrastructure consulting, really helping our clients look at how they move their operations and practices to the cloud, or what things they keep on-premise. So we have a variety of things we do, but it really always came back to the accounting systems, but as a result of that, we're doing a lot of other things that touch the accounting system. So enough about Brittenford and what we do, and just want to talk a little bit about kind of setting the stage for organizations and why they are moving to the cloud. And I always find it's interesting when you look at surveys, because I think surveys give us a good sense of what's happening and what people are really thinking. Armanino and McKenna is a fairly large CPA firm with a national presence, did a survey a year or so ago, and they asked CFOs, which that's kind of my background, and that's why this resonated with me, but how they perceive their roles and what they're doing. When you look at it, what they say their current role is, over 60% of them say, yeah, they're doing a lot of scorekeeping. You think about the CFO and the green eye shades, or they're the gatekeeper. In the past, they would be the person who always say no. But when you really ask them what they want to do, they want to be driving the business and accelerating the business. And so you kind of look at this, go, wow, and you compare what they are doing to what they want to be doing. The question is, well, what's holding them back? And really the thing that was holding them back seems to be four major issues from becoming that business accelerator or helping the organization grow. So they're spending a lot of times with inefficient cash management and budgeting processes. I think we all know folks that they're constant in budget mode. So they're doing that, and it's a very manual process. They have inefficient business processes within the organization. So that could be that they're doing duplicate data entry, data systems aren't integrated, so it's just how the organization looks at all their information. it's really, the other thing is the challenge is how they get information to the appropriate manager within the organization. And finally, the things that are holding back is they're looking at how to make the finance and accounting operations more efficient. So they're really spending their time doing kind of nuts and bolts things, and that's what's holding them back. So a question that CFO Magazine asked, once again we're focusing on CFOs, but I think gives a good indicator of what's there. It's like, is cloud computing the answer to these questions? And so they asked CFOs this, and it's interesting. Although there's high hopes for it, you look at most CFOs and they really don't know what cloud computing is and what that means. So when you look about overcoming objections, the CFO tends to be a person that is in the cycle, the sales cycle, as you're trying to sell a solution. And if a lot of them don't know what it means, well, that's the challenge right there. And then sometimes they're looking at solutions but not really sure what they're at. So I think that's the biggest objection and the biggest challenge we have as we look at this is they don't know what it is. And so our job is to educate them of what it means and how the benefits and how it will help them become that business accelerator. But interestingly enough, if you look at the CFO Magazine asked the same group how cloud, from a long-term strategy, how it will affect the organization, and they believe, over half of them believe that it will enable them to significantly restructure their entire IT strategy. So we really see a dichotomy out there of what people want to do, what the potential is, where they think it can go, but the challenge is they don't know enough about it. So part of the objection is, dealing with objections is trying to understand what it is and how to educate and explain to people. There's another survey I saw recently, and this was done by the Cloud Accounting Institute, and they went through and they looked at organizations and saying what's their current use of a SaaS-based or cloud-based solution and their intended use of it. And over half of the folks, actually over 82% said they intend to use some sort of cloud accounting system, this is the Cloud Accounting Institute, in the future. And some of the things they're looking to do it for, which makes sense, could be bill payment, invoicing, backup disaster recovery, sales management, forecasting, as well as document management. So this gives us a sense of people really looking at the cloud, and the SaaS solution is a cloud solution, as a way to help them grow and where they currently are and where they want to be. Along the same lines, as you look at, there's a Sagatalk did a survey, this was about 2 years ago, and they looked at what things are in the cloud and what things do people intend to put in the cloud over time as the future goes. And I think we all realize that things that are currently in the cloud tend to be more of the social things and collaboration tools. And actually, Salesforce automation tends to be a big thing. So that was the biggest push where you saw people go into the cloud. The laggard tends to be on some of the back office operations, but those are actually the areas that, as an organization, they can get the most efficiencies. And those are coming as time goes. But this is a good indication of where we saw people are using the cloud and where they view the usage as we move forward here into 2014 and 2015. So you get about why are people looking at this, and there's really a couple of reasons why they're looking to do this. The first tier are some real cost savings items. It simplifies this whole software management. I think we all know a lot of people have all kinds of software, and either I call it shelfware, where it's sitting there, it's not being efficiently used, and they don't have a way to deal with this. Or the organization changes, and they either have an increase in numbers or applications they need, or that it decreases over time. And so that whole challenge there. So people are looking at the cloud as a way to help in that. But also, there's other things that they're looking to do as they go through this and over time. And we'll talk about a few of these later on, is about how to take some of these costs that are fixed costs and how to convert them to variable costs and make it more efficient to budget those as they move forward. And they also help how to improve business processes and reduce costs within the organization. So we've talked a little bit about what people want, where they kind of view the future, what are some of the benefits of it. But I think the next question that comes up is, okay, but what are some of the concerns about the cloud? And once again, from a survey, which gives us a sense of what people are thinking out there, the biggest one is, okay, I've got these cloud solutions. How do they talk to each other? And if I have a proliferation of cloud solutions, how easy is it to access information in the different systems and make sure the data is synchronized on an appropriate basis? So that's a big concern. And you look at this kind of as it slides down, security is another concern. And I think we've all heard of situations where there's been data breaches and so forth. So security is top of mind, folks. And then not as important is just uptime. And I think if you look at any reputable, decent cloud provider, they're putting on their site their availability or their SLAs, and they're telling people how much time you should expect this application to be working and when it isn't working, and so you can have that transparency and visibility out there. So, if you look at these and these concerns, all of these things are things that the cloud vendors can help you with in their solutions to help build this case for the cloud. It's, how well that application will talk with other systems. What are they doing from a security standpoint? And how are they publicly letting people know about security and the types of audits? The uptime of the system, and this also the whole total cost of ownership of the solution. In this slide here, what I wanted to present is just give you a sense of a couple different surveys and giving you a sense of what's happened over time and where people are going. The first survey was from a Forrester, and it was in 2010, and then the Cloud Accounting Institute within 2012. And as you look at it, as the whole cloud has become more mature and people are doing more with cloud solutions, there's been a slight shift. And the things that when you want to deal with overcoming objections is really the things that have jumped up are integrations, which we just talked about, and security. So as you're out there and you're building this case for a cloud solution, those are the things that really come top of mind. And you just got to be conscious of those because those are things that people are thinking about. And so as they go through and they look at solutions, if you can make sure you're addressing those concerns and those issues, you'll be much better off. So enough of the surveys and what's happening. And we saw one of the things about CFOs, they didn't understand what cloud computing is. So I wanted to take a kind of step back for a second and just talk about cloud computing, because you hear the word used quite broadly. We're a Microsoft partner, and if you hear Microsoft, they'll talk, they're all in the cloud. And that there's some truth to that, and there's some kind of like little shading of the gray there of what they are, because solutions can be different flavors of the cloud. So just kind of walking through kind of the history of where things were. Historically people had a client-server application. It was sitting on a server, sitting in the office, could be in a data center in that building, but it's maybe probably a closet, and that machine was sitting there. Technologies have advanced through, either through VMware or Microsoft Hyper-V, and now you can take that one box and now you can virtualize and have many servers within that one piece of hardware. Some people think that's cloud, and it could be if you had that virtual machine and maybe it's sitting in a hosted environment. So the hosting was, you have people out there that said, look, we're going to deal with this whole redundancy, backup, disaster recovery. I think back in my past when I was at Picture Vision, we were hosting photo sharing for Kodak. We had a big server room and we had a backup generator in case power went down, but that became a very inefficient process. Ultimately, we moved some things to a data center, and that data center has more scale, and that's where we could host machines, and we had access within cages and so forth, and you could move that in there. So you kind of layer on that virtualization and hosting, and it kind of gives the sense of this is a cloud solution. You do access it via the internet, but you've got to use an intermediary layer of technology. It could be Citrix, or it could be remote desktop. So there's different access to get there, but you can access it from anywhere. You don't have to worry about VPN and into the office and so forth. And kind of the last piece of this evolution is cloud computing. This is what I call multi-tenant cloud computing, and this is where there are applications out there that one big environment, one big technology, and they have the way to segment or allow people to see their information only. And we'll go through a couple of examples of what those could be in a little bit, but there is an evolution. So when people say cloud, you just have to be careful about what type of cloud they want, because there are different flavors of the cloud. So because of this confusion, Gartner actually went about and they came up with a definition of what is cloud computing. And they've got, 5 attributes that they have defined as being, what is cloud computing. So, the first one, it's service-based. So there is a service, and you think about when we talk about SaaS, software as a service, so there is a service that's being provided. Second thing is scalability or elasticity. So it allows you to do up and down. The historical model with client-server applications, you would buy users, and you bought them and you owned them, and you may not need that many users. So what happens if you need to downsize? So you can't go down as easily. Well, if you need to go up, well, they could always sell you more licenses, but it was that down going down. The third component, according to Gartner, is it's shared. So it's pooled. So it has the ability to multiple client needs. Now, virtualization, in a way, does that, but we think of bigger data centers and pools, and multiple people can work with that application. A fourth attribute is that it's metered, so it's based on something. It could be based on servers and CPU. It could be on processing time. It could be on users, storage. So there's some sort of basis that they're licensing this service to you. And finally, it's using the internet to deliver that. And so if you have all those attributes, that's how Gartner defines, what is cloud computing. So that prior slide, we were talking about some of those different components. They're really don't meet all of them. Virtualization meets maybe number 3, but doesn't meet all of these components. So cloud computing is a more broader concept. So with that kind of framework of what Gartner has defined as cloud computing, I just want to talk about some of the terms that you'll hear out there and why it's so confusing. So, you start out with sort of the cloud continuum here, and we have on-premise product sales, the historical model. Client-server application was sitting somewhere in a server room. And then it evolved to that on-premise application was being hosted. And that hosting could be in your data center of the organization, or it could be just somebody that you work with. And that's where the off-premise hosting comes in. And so you see a lot of that, and we see a lot of that in the Microsoft space of the ERP systems, where from an economy standpoint, they don't want to have the overhead of managing these applications. We'll move them off-site. The next component is there is the ability to have a private cloud. And this is going to use some technology in a data center, and somebody's going to put together an environment for you that it's your own little cloud. And it's very similar to the off-premise hosted, but just it's how it's accessed and how that information and what storage you have in there. And then finally, you have this public cloud computing or multi-tenant cloud computing. And you look at those, and there's a lot of examples out there, and I don't think a lot of them we really realize that we're using. So if you need to spin up a server, we do some application development. We need a server. We can go out to Amazon EC2, and we can get a server instantaneously. We can go to Microsoft. They've got their Azure platform. That's where these providers are putting these services out there. You can do it. Google, you can get servers or backup capacity. So there's a lot of things where you can just spin it up off the internet, and it's accessible via a web browser. And then from an application standpoint, 2 of them that I talked about, Intact, we work with that as an accounting system. And then Microsoft, not on the accounting systems, but on their CRM product. Their CRM product, CRM Online, is a cloud solution. They have Office 365. It's a cloud solution, pure cloud solution. And Microsoft has kind of their feet in both camps. You can also get those products as an on-premise product. But then also Salesforce.com, everyone's aware of that one. That is a cloud solution. So with that kind of continuum, you'll hear a couple terminologies about cloud computing. Software as a service, or SaaS. This is where it's an application. You're subscribing to it. It could be Intact, Salesforce.com, Office 365. But it's based on some sort of user count, and you're either paying a per user per month or per year price on that. The second is platform as a service. And you're starting to see more and more of this where you need the ability to just have it a server, an environment. Microsoft Azure is one of them that you'll see out there, or Amazon EC2, where I just want that environment or that server and some technologies with it. I don't want anything else, and I'll install my applications there. And finally is infrastructure as a service. And this is really where you see providers, and we see it a lot with the Microsoft space, where they take their on-premise application and they just want to have somebody who's going to be hosting that, but providing a service there where there's going to be backup and disaster recovery, and they can access that, and there's also automatic updates of the operating system that's part of that. So you'll see more of that. So in this whole cloud space, there's an evolution, and that's part of the confusion of what's out there. So what information is already out in the cloud? And if you really step back and think about it, there's a lot that's already out there in the cloud. So when you talk about security concerns and people worry about how easy is it to work with this information, there's a lot out there. And the first two are the ones that really, or I should say the first three, jump out at me. I think everyone pretty much does some sort of online banking now, and there's a lot of information that's being accessed over the cloud. And from a personal standpoint, if you're not, if you've overcome that hurdle of security with your banking, it's a little bit easier to deal with the cloud. The second one is payroll. I think most organizations have outsourced their payroll to a provider such as ADP or Paychex or Ceridian, and all that is being maintained by them, and you update information on your payroll records via the internet. And the final thing is credit card transactions. There's virtual terminals that people are swiping. You've got the little queue. You can have it put on a smartphone, but a lot of credit card transactions are done. So if you look at it, a lot is already out in the cloud. And as you're dealing with objections, it's about how we put in context to it of other information they're doing. Number 5 on this list is interesting. And this is my CFO background. When you think about it, we look at our accounting folks look at data and say, oh, this is our most important data, it's our financial results. But it actually isn't. Our most important information is our sales information. It's our customer information. It's our leads and our contacts. And that information, I'd say in the past 5 years, almost every organization has put their sales data out in the cloud via Dynamics CRM or Salesforce or Sugar CRM or whatever application they're using. And that's probably, from an organization standpoint, one of their highest valuable assets is that information about who their customers are and those contacts at the customers. As I mentioned, this is just a list of some of the different cloud solutions out there, application. Today's webinar that we're on is a cloud application. We're on GoToWebinar or GoToMeeting. So they're out there. So there's a whole variety of there. And I think that's the challenge is you walk through this and feel when you address people's objections is give them context to other things and understand what other applications they're using and what's already out in the cloud, because it's a lot easier to deal with it once they can see the context of the solution you're trying to present, and then you talk about other things they already have in the cloud. So enough about why organizations are moving to cloud. I want to take a few minutes and now talk about just some of the economics of cloud solutions. I mentioned earlier one of the things that the cloud can provide is it can actually shift the cost model. And what that does is, have people look at it from a standpoint of taking the cost of something they're doing and make it to something that can be budgeted for on an ongoing basis and make it I call OPEX or operating expense and replace what typically was a capital expense or CapEx. So, why would you do that? And it's sort of this rent versus buy scenario. And a lot of organizations will say, well, I want to buy. Why would I rent? But the thing is, if you buy, it doesn't give you flexibility. And a lot of people want to have flexibility. So that gives you, well, maybe it's better to rent or to have something where I'm budgeting for it annually. The other thing you'll see is when you buy a system that's traditionally with an on-premise solution, there's a lot more upfront cost. And part of it's the economies of scale. If you're buying an on-premise solution, there's cost about installing that application and configuring it. Whereas if you have a cloud solution, they've already built into their solution tools that make it easier to configure it and get it up. There's no separate installation, it's just provisioning. So there's a shift of cost there. Also, as a solution, they've thought about how to make this more cost effective and how to make it easier for people to get up to speed on it. And they've built those tools into it versus the on-premise solutions, which traditionally took a lot of configuration, setup, and some training. So really the value proposition and why people are looking at the cloud is all about reducing these upfront infrastructure costs and also about making it easier to rapidly deploy these solutions. To me, the biggest thing about any new technology or any new solution that you deploy out there is user acceptance and getting people comfortable with it. And if the deployment is complex and takes a long time, it's longer to see the benefit of that, and you need a solution that can kind of minimize that upfront cost and quickly derive some benefits to the organization. So the value really comes in, there's a lot of IT cost savings that come out of this, and there's also some infrastructure cost savings that are from a cloud solution standpoint. Just want to take a second to kind of talk about as you compare this, because this is probably the biggest objection that I run into when I talk to folks about cloud computing versus on-premise solutions, and we sell both. And this iceberg slide is a really good depiction or caption of really the cost structure that's out there. And this was something that Yankee Decision Group put together and did some analysis of their information. And so on the surface, when you look at an on-premise solution, they're looking at, well, I'm going to buy the license. But most of the time they're just looking at the license, and I'll look at the implementation fees. And they're going to take that software license, and they're going to compare it to the subscription fee that you're going to pay with a cloud solution. And the first thing you'll hear is, you mean I have to pay that subscription fee every year? Gee, it's a little bit less than that license, but wow, every year. But until you then start looking below the surface and you really start analyzing what are the other costs associated with the two solutions. And with the on-premise solution, the implementation tends to be more expensive. And I can tell you from our experience, those different solutions that we work with, the on-premise are, and just because some of them take more to, I got to install some software, I got different technologies I got to worry about, I got SQL servers, all that kind of database stuff to deal with, and version compatibility, where you don't have to deal with that in the cloud solution. I have some hardware, and that hardware may be virtualized, but then I got somebody who needs to maintain it, and that maintenance may be somebody who is, I've outsourced that to, but I've put that there, and then there's always ongoing cost. With an on-premise solution, every 3 to 5 years, or maybe sooner, there's a new version that comes out, and that's the model of these software companies. Always new features and functions, but then you have to upgrade the software, which on the surface may not seem difficult, but maybe there's some integrations you've built, and those integrations don't work. Maybe there's some customizations that have been made. You have to recompile code. You've got to do some testing. And so there's a lot of ongoing costs that may be in waves versus on the cloud solutions. Once that solution is in, whenever there's an upgrade that the solution provided, the software company provides, it's included in that subscription fee. They're testing integration, so they've defined with their application programming interfaces how the data will connect. As long as you haven't touched any of those things, everything will work. So there's a lot less ongoing costs, and it's more of a flat line, whereas on the on-premise, you'll see very spiky waves of cost structure. So I think keeping this in mind and this, getting the companies you're talking to understand this goes a long way with understanding the economics of cloud solutions. The other thing about cloud solutions is really allows an organization, it can grow through the evolution, and you don't need to replace these solutions. If you put the right solution in place, you may start with just something, I only need certain components of that, and then as you move along the scale as your organization changes, and maybe you grow, expand, go public, you acquire, those solutions can actually grow with you, and you'll be able to scale with that versus, gee, I have got this solution, and now we've gone through this major change, and now I've got to replace a brand new system and change it out. And another area from an economics of the cloud is really about disaster recovery and security. A lot of the companies that I talk to, I'll ask them about, well, what are you doing for backup and disaster recovery? And the question usually, or the answer to that question typically is, I think we back up daily, and I think the tapes are sent off-site, but I'm not sure, and let me go check on that. Now, some of our clients are more sophisticated, and they've got online processes where they go through that. That's just part of the equation. Then the next question would be, what do you guys do if there is some sort of disaster? Brittenford Systems, we're located outside of Washington, D.C. A lot of stuff going on here. Focal point of, could be natural disasters or just, security standpoint. And if your application needed to actually have to be restored somewhere else, how can you deal with it? I had a client several years ago. They were in downtown Baltimore. A hurricane came through downtown Baltimore. The building they were in was on the Baltimore Harbor. It got flooded. They weren't able to get into the building. The building had their server. On the server was all their payroll information. They couldn't pay payroll. So they had some issues there with just backup and disaster recovery. In most organizations, they will talk about that, but they're not doing anything about that. So when you look at a cloud solution, one of the things that any reputable cloud solution is going to have is they're going to have a disaster recovery process where they're backing up the data on some, it could be mirrored servers or hourly or whatever their process is, and I'll tell you what they're doing. But they're also doing disaster recovery, and they're actually testing their disaster recovery, and they have hot sites, and they can go through, and most cloud providers can tell you how long it will take for them to restore the system and what amount of data was lost and how frequently they go through that test. This whole disaster recovery and security is something that they're providing. The other thing that cloud providers are doing, and the economics of the cloud solution, is just access controls. The biggest risk on any solution is access and how you get to it, and security around it. Just recently, there was a lot about Heartbleed and that security risk. Well, is the cloud provider, they have folks that are actually out there looking at this stuff frontline, actually hiring people trying to hack into that, and that compared to an on-premise solution where chances are you're hoping that your IT professional is up to date, is reading all the security releases and knows what to do, and is that more secure? So from an economic standpoint, when these cloud solutions provide these extra services, that's included versus what an on-premise solution probably isn't doing or the organization isn't doing. That's another economic component that really you can focus on. And the security thing comes up a lot, and I'm usually able to overcome that very quickly by comparing somebody who goes through a process and actually hires people to try to hack into the system versus an on-premise solution where they think things are okay and they have no way to verify that. So then we've talked about why people are moving to the cloud. We've talked about some of the economics of the cloud. And I want to take kind of the final part of the presentation and talk about just how to build your business case for a cloud solution. Because that's really what, to me, it comes down to. If you can build that business case, it makes it so much easier to overcome objections when people say, I'm not so sure about that solution, I have all these other things. Because it always comes back to me, it's about finances, and it's, what are the things that are going to help the organization advance and grow. So I would say the first thing is, it's got to be simple. It just sounds kind of crazy, but if you can't quantify why you're doing something very easily, very succinctly, it's hard to sell it. And this one is a very simple, hey, this solution is going to reduce our revenue linkage by, 0.5%. And we've got $10 million in revenue. Hey, we're going to pay for the system in less than a year. People can get their minds around that. Or, hey, if we do this, it's going to save somebody time. That person's time is worth X. That will pay for the system in a certain amount of time. So when you put things in that context, folks are always looking at it and saying, yeah, I get that. That's simple. So I'd say keep it simple. Start at the high level. Be able to quantify that. But that's not always going to work for most organizations. So you're going to have to be a little bit more detailed in going through the process. So what you really need to do is you got to kind of go frame all the benefits of a cloud solution. And I've broken down the benefits into really 4 major components of why an organization is going to change the solution. I've got better visibility. So yes, maybe I can see the information and do my own analysis of the information, or the timeliness of that information. As an organization, it could be sales or accounting or operations information. But if it's outdated and they're looking at information from a week old, that's a concern. So if you can do something that will speed the visibility and give people, decision makers, better control of that information and quantify that. Next thing is, okay, if we implement this system, what are some of the revenue gains from this? We're going to be able to get our invoices out quicker. We bill our quotes. We can collect the money faster. But think about those business processes in the organization and what are the revenues that are going to come into that. And finally, cost standpoint. What are the costs that you can reduce? And some of them are going to be direct costs and some are going to be indirect costs. And we'll talk about the indirect ones in a bit. Those are always harder ones, and you'll get some pushback on those. But those are really part of this. When you look at the business case, those indirect costs are real costs on the organization. So once you've gone through those and you've mapped out those, 3 major areas of drivers, you've got to actually help map out, okay, let's look at our options. We could stay on the current system, or we can go to a new system. Stay on the new system seems like the easiest answer because, hey, I don't have to put any money out. But there also is a deep hidden cost of we're very ineffective, our productivity is low, we have poor quality. So there's a lot of hidden costs there that you need to, part of doing nothing is at least they're aware of what doing nothing is. Next would be, okay, let's compare going with a cloud solution to an on-premise solution. And that's where we're talking about the iceberg scenario of what are the costs and make sure they can understand the total cost of the solutions and what is the return on investment of the solution. And finally, comparing one cloud solution to the other cloud solution, because there are other ones out there. And there's some that are holistic suite solutions and there's some that are best-in-breed solutions. You really got to look at what solution is going to be the best fit for the organization and help map out those different options. So we talked about the drivers, the options, and this gets back to my accountant part of it. You got to map it out. You got to have a matrix. You got to help people make a decision here, and you really look at these 3 major areas, and you compare the 3 options out there, and help them to make a more informed decision. So with that, it's kind of all you got to net this all out, and what does all this mean? So you need to talk about the benefits of switching to a new solution. Focus on those upsides. How is it going to help the organization do things faster, generate more revenue, collect cash quicker? You're also going to deal with, what are the downsides of the risk that this is going to deal with? Some of those downsides could be cost. Some of those could be lost opportunities. When you think about revenues and sales, if people don't have the right information or it takes a long time to get a quote out there, and you look at your competitors and what they're doing and how fast they can get it, that could be a downside just because you don't have the right systems in place. And then you kind of look at, okay, of these options, are we outgrowing our own system? Is the organization have a propensity of moving things from on-premise to cloud? And then what are the trade-offs of the cloud? The second one bullet there I just want to talk about briefly. I had one client that we didn't realize this until we started talking to them, engaging with them. They had moved every application in the organization to the cloud except for their accounting system. And that was the only one. And so they started the conversation of, like, what are our options? And we were talking through their options with them. But the objection was just to make sure the functionality was there. But as an organization, they were ready to move to the cloud. So very quickly, the conversation became, what are your needs? What are the different applications that can provide that need to you, and go there. So as you're talking to organizations, get a good sense of where they are. I have had other organizations that I've spoken with that say, we don't want to move anything to the cloud. And they have fears about the cloud. Well, it's hard to sell somebody on the cloud if they want to have an on-premise solution. So make sure you're aware of that early in the discussions of where things are going. I mentioned earlier a couple of concepts, total cost of ownership and return on investment. There are tools out there that will let you compare the cost of these different solutions. Nucleus Research is an organization that focuses, their business model is on return on investment and total cost of ownership. Some of these software providers have actually engaged with Nucleus to help build models that will go through that. But really, it's a financial model that lets you go through and look at that. And it lets you look at hard dollars of different solutions. It could be Intact versus Microsoft Dynamics GP. And as you build these models, they tend to be on, anywhere from 3 to 5 year models where you look at costs. And yes, there are some subjective things you're going to put in there, but what I found is to enable this or get over these objections that folks have, provide the models to folks. I may seed the models with the data that I've heard from them through my discovery conversations, but then let them take the model and adjust it appropriately. But you got to give people a framework of where to start the conversation and discussion as they go through this. Some of the things that I see, that make sure you got to factor into this that will, as you build this case, this business case, is about, cost savings are one that jumps to the top of your mind. But there's some other softer, more intangible items there. As an organization, are they looking for telecommuting? How is the organization dealing with its business continuity? What's their philosophy of IT and what are they doing there? So kind of make sure you understand that as you build this total cost of ownership and where they can go and how the organization, the cloud solution fits into their long-term strategy. A concept that's very similar to total cost of ownership is return on investment. And this is really looking at this cloud solution is competing with other priorities within the organization, other investments that the organization is looking to make, and you've got to be able to build the case of saying, if this organization invests $1 today, what kind of return will they get from that investment at that $1? So some of the ones that you'll see from a total cost of ownership is, there's some upfront software cost and ongoing cost that's part of the equation. Second piece will be, yes, it can have some reduction of IT operating budgets. It also allows you to make your deployments fit in where it makes sense for the organization. You can get some benefits of some different licensing structures and pricing, so as you scale, you can do that. But the other thing that a cloud solution that you need to factor in your return on investment solution is, what sort of efficiencies are you getting there? And Nucleus Research is one reference that they've actually gone out and they'll benchmark and they'll give some surveys or talk to people that have used those solutions and have said, if you've implemented this cloud solution, we have found on average, people are 20% more efficient, and that efficiency then can equate to $1. And those are things that you definitely need to include into your return on investment calculations. Some of the things that we see a lot where people don't want to factor in, but they really are these internal labor costs. And that one jumps out at you because people will say, well, gee, this solution will make us more efficient, but I'm not going to be able to reduce any headcount. And a lot of times there are cost savings there. That labor can be used elsewhere within the organization, or that person can be doing other things that can help drive the organization. So a system that will actually make somebody more efficient and reduce the effort they're doing on something is a labor savings, and that internal labor cost is something that should be included. But some other ones that may not be as obvious, if there's an on-premise solution, there are additional utility costs associated with having a server in place. There's a lot of hardware and maintenance that goes on, and if you have an IT infrastructure group, you may not see it as much, but those people are spending their time is dollars, to maintaining these servers, patching these servers, they're doing training, a lot of different things that's happening there, and that's a cost that needs to be factored into your analysis. And then finally is, some things about disaster recovery and backup, if that really is occurring in the solution, so you have a true apples-to-apples comparison as you look at the two. So that kind of ends where the case we talked about of why people are looking to move to the cloud, what are some of the reasons and benefits of doing it, and some of the objections of getting there. So with that, if I don't know if there's any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. We can open up for questions now. If anyone would like to ask a question, please, you can raise your hand using the raise hand button located in the GoToWebinar control panel. If at any time your question has been answered, please just lower your hand and remove yourself from the question queue. Or if you prefer, you can still ask a question via the chat box and the chat window using the located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And yes, General, a few questions have come through. We will be sending out the link to the PowerPoint and the recording as well. Brian, how easy is it for customers to obtain their data from cloud solutions if they want to move to another solution, either cloud or on-premise?
Yeah, that's a question that comes up quite a bit because there is a concern. You know, when you think about an on-premise solution, people go, well, I have the server here, I have the data, it's backed up in a database, and I can easily get that. And with a cloud solution, you no longer have that database. It's really about talking with the cloud provider and what they will do. The cloud providers all understand that this is a major concern. People want their data, their access to it. And so they'll have tool sets. Some will provide a service that will cost money where you can actually maintain that information in an archived environment. Some clients will say, well, I just want to be able to access it whenever I want. Well, that's a service if you want that, and there's a cost with that. But then other providers will have a mechanism where you can actually download that data so that they'll make it as easy as possible for you to transition to elsewhere. Now, cloud providers, their business model on subscription is subscription renewals. They want to keep you, but they also don't want to have a barrier up front that you are hesitant to use their service because you can't get your data out easily afterwards. So with the ones that I work with, they all have mechanisms where you can offload that data, and maybe through flat file exports or whatever. And it's a lot of data, but if you truly want that information, they have mechanisms so you can get that.
Great, thank you. Another question, Brian. What is the relative time to deploy cloud versus on-premise applications?
I would say, you know, it depends on what application they're deploying. So, you know, use CRM. Dynamic CRM, you can have it spun up in a day, you know, no problem. If you're going to install it on site, it would be, you know, a couple days to get it up and running. Now, how you configure that application, how it meets your business processes, those can take time if you're going to customize it. But I would say, just as a general kind of benchmark, we find that, you know, on the accounting systems we're working with, probably the on-premise accounting systems probably have maybe 20 to 30% more time than a cloud solution. So the cloud solutions, you know, if it was an on-premise solution, maybe it was a 3 to 4 month process to get it up and going. A cloud solution, maybe 2 to 3 months. So they are much quicker. Some of it's based on tool sets they provide. Some of it's just less things that you got to do. Also, the training and data loading, it tends to be a little bit easier.
Excellent, thank you. There are a lot of stories in the press about security breaches of major cloud providers. How do you overcome objections to the security of cloud solutions?
Yeah, that question comes up probably every day as I talk to somebody about a cloud. You know, it's a hard one because security is going to be it's going to be out there, and I guess what we hear about the big ones. So yeah, we heard about Yahoo, or I pick on them. You know, everyone's password was corrupted and or accessed, and people could get at that information. So I mean, they have high visibility. But really, it's when you're talking to somebody about a cloud solution, it's kind of frame it once again. So if the question is for them, for their environment, okay, what are you guys doing? What's your organization doing to protect your data? You know, what's your password protection policy? And how frequently do you make people change those? Do you have multiple identification methodologies in place? Cloud providers, you're seeing more and more of them. And I think it started with banking, and you're seeing it now with other applications. Two-step verification. You log in with a new laptop or maybe a tablet, and it says, I don't recognize you. We're going to send you an email to some address that was set up when it was set up, and then that'll help verify you and we'll give you a code so you can access the system. So it's really about just putting context to it. Yeah, security is always an issue, and if you talk to most cloud providers, they'll tell you the biggest security risk is the password. and people want to keep it simple because now we got lots of applications. And so what the cloud providers are doing to make sure they're tightening that area but not making it so onerous to actually access the application. So, I always tell people, think about their current environment with the servers in the closet, and I'll pick on them and say it's a 25-year-old who's your IT administrator. Is that person up to date and as knowledgeable as a firm that what they're selling is security? If you think about cloud providers, they're selling security of your data, your information, and they're having people trying to hack into the system, going through separate IT audits, it could be SSAE 16 audits or PCI compliance audits. Is that, is your organization through that rigor? And you can't guarantee that there will never be a security breach, but it's that comfort level. Where do you feel more comfortable? And where would you feel more comfortable talking to your board of directors or your investors of saying, we went with this cloud provider who did this and told us this contractually versus the 26-year-old that we hired, and we think he does a good job.
Great.
So I hope that answered the question.
Brian. Yeah. You mentioned that some of the ROI oversights are internal labor. If an organization is not planning on eliminating any positions when they move to cloud solutions, can you still include internal labor related to the current system to your TCO/ROI analysis?
Yes, I always do. And the way I explain it to people is that labor now can be used for something else in the organization. I was talking to a labor union, interesting enough, and that labor union, they don't lay off people. I said, but now this person whose job is going to be shifted, they no longer have this responsibility of maintaining this application, can actually be doing other things for your organization. That is a savings because there's things that weren't being done. Maybe they were being done by somebody else, but there is a savings there. And so I know it's a hard concept for people to overcome because they go, well, I'm not cutting people. But the fact that that person is spending time doing something is a cost of that solution. Now, how else you use them in the organization is really management's decision. But I think it is part of the savings for the discrete application that you're talking to them about, saying if you move to the cloud, here are savings, and here's a return on this investment to get there. And so it should be included in the analysis.
Great. Another question here. Data storage costs are reducing, but cloud storage for mirrored real-time data availability seems expensive to clients. Is this changing?
Slowly. What I've seen happen is it depends on the application you have and the data that's being maintained. And because on-premise solutions, storage seemed to be very cheap. You bought a server and it may have had so many terabytes of storage and you just forgot about it. And you move to the cloud and you want to say, well, I want to take all these terabytes of data with you, and the cloud providers are saying, yeah, we can provide that for you, but there is a cost of that, and is it being accessed? So what I've seen the cloud providers do is, they're providing certain levels of storage with their applications, and they can scale up and down. I think if somebody needs a lot of data stored, it's just part of the negotiation discussion as they move to the application of what really do they need and what will that cloud provider provide them in the negotiation. So I found, initially it was they were hard and fast. Now I'm seeing these cloud providers, it's all about getting people signed up on their service and maintaining those services. So they're doing some creative things about storage costs and what they're going to charge for those costs.
Awesome. All right, we have a specific question, excuse me, Brian, about handling a certain objection. If my cloud provider goes out of business, I may have my data, but no platform on which to access it. If I have on-premise, I still have software to access the data, even though it is unsupported if the vendor goes under. Their question is how to handle this kind of objection.
Well, so I actually have a client that's in the exact same boat, a little different twist. They had an on-premise solution. It was sitting on 2 boxes, and it had a weird licensing structure where it was actually tied to the CPU of the hardware. The hardware is crashing. They're out of luck too. So on the surface, it may seem safe, but at some point that on-premise solution will go out of business. I guess I would say go back to the question of look at the cloud provider you're dealing with, and part of you selling that solution is you've got to be comfortable with the viability of that company. I mean, nobody is 100% secure. My background is I worked for Eastman Kodak Company, one of their subsidiaries. They were in the Fortune 500 when I joined that company, Picture Vision. Their Kodak has been through bankruptcy. So things happen with organizations. So there's no guarantees anywhere. And although it may appear to be safer on the on-premise solution because I have it and I can use it forever, at some point in time that hardware will die and you'll have to go to something else. And that's what happened to my client is now they are in a dilemma because they had a hot replacement server and that hot replacement server is dying, and it's a key application. They're processing a lot of transactions and they're scrambling now to say we need something that's more reliable. So it's all about context. And if somebody has propensity saying I want an on-premise and I want it in my server, sometimes you can't overcome that if that's their propensity. It's just a matter of letting them know that may appear safe, but it's not a long-term safe solution. It's just a little bit safer.
Excellent. All right, we had another question, a hand raised from Robert Machete, it looks like. Robert, I'm going to unmute you real quick, and you can ask your question right now. Robert, if you, I have unmuted you. If you want to ask your question, go for it. Otherwise, we can move on to the next. Okay. Well, actually, that is all the questions we have at this point, Brian. So I guess we'll wrap that up. We're actually getting close to the hour anyway. So, Brian, I just wanted to thank you for your time. We appreciate it. So, yeah, your insight was very helpful. We appreciate it very much.
All right, and I put my contact information here. If anyone has any follow-up questions, I'd be more than happy to see if I can help you with those questions.
All right, great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending.